This is a tutorial on how to operate the DynaPath Wind Delta lathe in basic operation or manual operation mode. So once you power on the machine, you will be encountered with a e-stop icon, and what we need to do is to release the e-stop buttons on the main panel and the MPG pendant. So once that's released, we need to next hit the reset button. This will servo on and enable the lubrication pump to lubricate the axes. Now that the servos are on, we can go to jog mode, and on the upper left corner we see what mode we are in. It's currently in jog. That means that we can use these jog buttons to run the machine axes, and keep in mind the rapid override will affect the speed at which you run these axes. So if I were to press the Z-axis jog buttons and then the X-axis jog buttons, I can run the machine axes respectively. Next, we can engage the MPG mode to use the pendant station to run the machine. And again, the rapid override has an additional ×1 ×10 ×100 scaling for the MPG. So with that being on ×100 right now, I can rotate the MPG hand wheel and control each axis. Okay. Next, the incremental jog function allows us to use the jog buttons to move the machine a certain distance. For example, if I engage the 1-inch distance, for every press of the jog button, the machine will move 1 inch. And when we're using manual operation, the relative coordinate system is one that is managed manually by the user or operator. It's independent of any program that's running on the control. So we can actually zero it. And now when I press the jog button, the jog Z incremental button, it will move exactly 1 inch, 0.1 inch, 0.01 inch respectively, depending on which selector you have on. Next, we can run the spindle. From the spindle screen, we can specify what RPM we want to run at. For example, I will input 500 RPM and then press the cycle clockwise run button or the spindle clockwise button, and that will run the spindle to the commanded speed. To stop it, we can press the spindle stop button on the panel or on the screen. And lastly, the panel button, the panel screen, allows us to control some of the machine functions like the work lamp, flood coolant on or off, lubrication, and air blast. And in this case, we don't have the CE safety regulations, so we don't use the setting mode. But if you did have the safety guards and CE regulations, that means you need to engage the automatic mode in order to run any program and let the machine run in automatic. And in our case, we do have a turret on this machine. It's a 4-way tool post. We can actually use the turret clockwise button to change tools. Okay. Okay, and that's if you had a tool turret. Otherwise, the turret clockwise button will not work. And for this turret, it only operates in the clockwise direction. So that pretty much sums up the jog screen. The DRO and semi-auto screens allow us to manually move the machine using the MPG pendant. And the coordinate system that will be active is the relative coordinate system. It is a system where we can manually zero it to any location we manually move our machine to. On the screen, there are also the spindle command, RPM field, and the current tool in which you can use it to change to the target tool that you want. For example, I'll change to tool 1. Okay. So that's the MPG screen. I can then perform additional semi-automatic functions such as move to, feed line, perform a thread, or feed a arc. So first I will demonstrate move to move the machine to a specific location incremental or relative to your current location. So for example, if I wanted to move the z-axis positive 1 inch from where I am, I can input that 1 inch there and hit cycle start. It will first ask you to run the MPG to manually move the axis. The next press of cycle start will move the same distance, and if you did not want to use MPG run, just press continue and exit to let the machine run automatically. Next, I will demonstrate how to feed a line. So similar to before, I will input a position relative to where I currently am, and in this illustration I will zero my z-axis, and for the incremental move I will move -1 in z, and then I will enable a second position and move +1 in z. So the machine will move -1 in z using a feed rate of 15, and then move +1 in z using a feed rate of 15. So once I hit cycle start, you can see that the machine brought the tool in -1 direction in z first, and then immediately backed off +1 direction in z. This allows us to very quickly and easily square off a part or face off a part. Next, I'll show how we would do a simple thread. So once we enter the threading page, we are presented with a few input parameters here. The first is the thread depth. In this case, I'll do 0.05. This is the depth of the thread. Then the length of the thread, I'll say longitudinally about -1 inches. And this will be relative to the current position. So if you were to do a right-hand thread, you would use a -1 length. If you wanted to do a left-hand thread, you would need to put in a positive length to machine the thread from left to right, assuming your tool is facing the same direction. Next, the lead is the actual pitch of the screw. In inch, let's say for example it's 10 threads per inch, I will need to put in the actual height of each thread, which is 0.1 inches. And then passes is however many passes I want to perform. So if I were to put in 5 passes, it will increment a 0.01 in x for each pass. And lastly, the retract is how far to retract the tool in x. I will retract by 0.2. And so once I've got the thread parameters inputted, then I can specify a spindle command, and if I were to hit cycle start, the machine will perform the threading in 5 passes. Okay, that concludes the threading event in semi-auto. And lastly, feed arc. With the feed arc, it's similar to the feed line where you would specify a certain radius, let's say 0.5, and an endpoint relative to where you are. So for a 0.5 radius arc, we need to travel x minus 0.5, and z is minus 0.5. So if that's the proper arc that I want to feed, I can hit cycle start, and the control will feed the arc using the feed rate 15 and perform the feed arc command. And that concludes the semi-auto DRO introduction.